I'd like to talk some more about myths in American archaeology, things which drive the narrative that really are driving the narrative in a bad direction, have been for some time. If you could get money out of archaeology, that would be a good thing. Um, but anyway, so the myths that I'm talking about today is the myth of expectation, how expectations are being held up as reasons to ignore facts. And so there's some things to be said about that. But I find that, excuse me, most of the myths or the things that I think are wrong in American archaeology come from a flaw of basic methodology. The flaw that archaeology is somehow like physics, where or mathematics, where there's an answer that you can get. And I don't think archaeology should be regarded as the pursuit of a single fact. It should be regarded as the pursuit of a spectrum of possibilities, and then the evidence can be added to the spectrum without necessarily saying that this part of the spectrum has to be in conflict with that part of the spectrum. It's like we've got to decide what's the only true answer. And I think in a lot of cases there is no single true answer, and that it's not just methodologically foolish; it's actually pointless in and for itself. Um, and see what. So some examples of that is the first Americans. Why must there be a first American? It's a meaningless idea. You'll never find a first American. And the correct way to think about it is early Americans, first-ish Americans, the spectrum of people who arrived in America at different times in history, and what the evidence is for that. You could say, I expected man to do this, I expected man to do that. Meanwhile, you've got actual evidence of man in America, and you should not be ignoring it because you have expectations that are conflicted with the facts. So let's see, another example of this one size fits all theory of that spoils archaeology is this idea that a single site or a single piece of evidence is going to rewrite the story. It never does, and that's a foolish way to think about it. It's much more productive, and we would not be. And I've never really experienced people being at each other's throats. I've been on the receiving end a little bit of it, um, but it tends to come down always to people don't like to accept other possibilities. I think you should start off assuming that there is no single answer, and then you'll be a little bit more comfortable interacting with people who think about things in a different way than you do or have different facts. So much for the generalization. Let's get down to some examples. I was listening to a discussion of the White Sands footprints, and this was in a video by Desert Drifter, who's a very thoughtful guy, and he's listening to one archaeologist tell him about the desert sands. And you know the story, footprints in the sand, seeds above it and below the footprint. Some seeds can be dated over and over again, and there's other ways of dating things. They find that these footprints are 23,000 years old. So that's the story that Desert Drifter is passing along from the archaeologist. And then the archaeologist says, but we never found any campfires or lithic debris associated with footprints that age. We dug all over the place. We found plenty of hearths and campsites, but they were all more recent. Here we go now. I would have expected to find some lithics or some campsites for these people. Therefore, the dates are questionable. So I got to say, let me stop you right there. Why do your expectations about campsites have any kind of weight that's equal to the fact of these footprints and the dating that's been associated to them? Your expectations are your expectations. You can explain them, but they are not facts. And the absence of campsites, good Lord, there could be many, many different reasons why you didn't find campsites right there. And just saying my expectation of campsites is enough for me to dismiss the idea of the footprints in the white sands. It's like, that's not the right methodology for approaching things. That's one example, the white sands example. Another example is the Cerutti Mastadon Site. Cerutti, I don't know if it's spelled with a C or an S. Too lazy to look it up. Some people spell it differently. This is a place where they found mammoth bones that were broken when they were fresh. Not a lot of forces in nature that can break a mammoth bone, especially in a silty place that was all made out of mud, like where they found these mammoth bones in San Diego. And they found a few other things besides broken bones. They found some large river cobbles that came from, I don't know, a quarter of a mile, whatever, 200 yards over there that were over here in the silt where they didn't belong. Now, those are facts, right? And but it's 120,000-year-old bones, and so you don't find human remains, you don't find campfires, you don't find lithic debris, any of the things that you expect to find with an early man site. But what you do find is evidence that someone was bringing cobbles from there to there, and someone was breaking mammoth bones when they were, or mastodon, I don't remember. Mastodon. Anyway, they were breaking the bones when they were still fresh. That's a pretty good piece of evidence that there was people here. I don't know of other creatures that carry large rocks around or break bones. So there's a how did that happen? And there's all one good explanation for it. And you say, let's fit those two things together and assume possibly that man broke those things. A man was here 120,000 years ago. And guy says, yeah, but I would have expected to find some lithic debris or some human remains. Therefore, this is not a valid date. And so, again, the guy, you might as well, I don't care if he's a famous professor or a gas station attendant. They just have opinions, they don't have facts. And so the expectation of a Harvard professor should not outweigh the facts discovered by a gas station attendant. And not that there are gas station attendants out there arguing with Harvard professors. My point is simply that expectations are not facts, they're theoretical things. And to say, I have a theory which prevents me from understanding or believing or having any kind of common sense when it comes to this fact, I think that the expectation should be the thing that's put in doubt, not the facts. If you want to question the interpretation of the facts, go ahead and go do it. Go do the footwork. You want to say those footprints in the sand, those dating methods are inaccurate. You got to make your point. You can't just say, I expect lithics, therefore I don't have to listen to your dating technology. That's just lazy. And it all stems from this need for there to be one possibility, not a spectrum of possibilities. So um, that's the myth of your expectation. And I want to add another little chapter to this discussion, which is where um, they use the phrase extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, I hate this statement, okay? And the reason I hate it is because the people who make it are inevitably the serious grown-ups who, in fact, are unwilling to entertain alternative hypotheses than the conventional wisdom. And they believe somehow that the conventional wisdom isn't extraordinary, but the claim that conflicts with it is extraordinary. And then, blah, 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 the extraordinary claims, that's extraordinary. And I'm being snide and sarcastic because it's a drooling idiot would say something like that, unaware of the fact that their expectations are being taken for granted and that the other person's expectations are being challenged. And I don't know if that follows from the need for a single simple answer, but I think uh, it's only extraordinary from your theoretical point of view that man wasn't here 20,000 years. If someone says man was in America 20,000 years ago, or 120,000 years ago, 23,000 years, 120,000 years ago, that's an extraordinary claim. I don't see that as extraordinary at all. The claim that there were no man in America 23,000 years ago, I say that's an extraordinary claim because every other form of large mammal had come across one way or another long before that, and at a time when there were hominids in Asia. So you're telling me that no hominids, but plenty of everything else, mice, bighorn sheep, whatever, 750,000 years ago to 100,000 years ago, or even more recently, mammals, camels went backwards across the Bering Land Bridge. Bighorn sheep went forwards across the Bering Land Bridge, but somehow it's extraordinary to claim that man was part of the blend of mammals that were present in Asia at the time that there was an open corridor or a way to get to America. It's what nonsense. Um, It's in no way extraordinary to assume that men were here, humans or human-like things. It's not extraordinary. For you to say that they weren't, that's extraordinary. And I'd like to see you try to prove that man wasn't here 20,000 years ago, especially with all the evidence from everywhere, every which way. The only thing wrong with all of the evidence of man being here 20,000 years ago is that some people just don't expect it. They're the serious grown-ups in the room. Serious grown-ups always believe the least that's believable. And so that shows you why they're not really very serious, because to be a good archaeologist, you have to believe a spectrum of possibilities and you have to be kind to your fellow students. And you need to understand and think about what they're saying. It's too bad that archaeology is competitive. Otherwise, we'd have a much broader set of possibilities and the ability to move forward in different directions. And wouldn't that be nice? Everything would be hunky dory. Final point is, don't let expectations override data.